Today is the second wedding anniversary of me and Virus S, the man who entered my life like a ray of sunshine breaking through the thick, dark clouds I lived under for nearly 3 decades. Tonight, a few hours ago, he knelt down in front of me in the tiny apartment we had made into a home together. Yellow string lights hung from the ceiling, the dim light shining on his face, highlighting his warm brown eyes that I always found comforting. The scent of scented candles, the lavender scent that he likes, wafts in the air, mixed with the soft music coming from the old speaker placed on the bookshelf, a jazz song that he often plays when we cook together. He held my hand, his rough fingers squeezing mine as if afraid I would disappear. His voice trembled, full of hope. Cream, will you marry me? In his hand was a ring, a fragile silver ring with a tiny blue stone, my grandmother's ring, sparkling like a distant memory that I once loved. I thought it would be the most beautiful moment of my life, a milestone marking the beginning of a future that I had never dared to dream of. But then, the joy shattered like a mirror falling to the floor, leaving me with sharp pieces of the past piercing deep into my heart. I can't breathe. I yelled at him, telling him to leave, my voice cracking like the sound of breaking glass. And now, as the clock strikes midnight on April 4th, 2025, I sit here alone in the dark with a broken heart and the memories I've tried to bury for the past 10 years resurfacing like ghosts that can't be dispelled. I met Virus S 3 years ago through Jake, my best friend, who was my husband in a marriage rooted not in love, but in desperation and compassion. At that time, I was 16 years old, living in a house where every corner of the wall was soaked in pain. My parents, whom I no longer call by that name, are not ordinary parents. They were demons in human form, turning my childhood into a series of horrifying days that I still cannot recount without trembling. I remember nights curled up in bed, listening to my father's heavy footsteps echoing down the stairs, each step a warning that his anger was about to explode. I remember the times my mother stood and watched, her eyes cold and emotionless, as my father raised his hand, leaving bruises on my skin that I had to hide under a long-sleeved shirt when I went to school. I remember the times I begged them to stop, but my crying only made them laugh, a twisted, malicious smile. One time when I was 14 years old, I tried to escape from home, running to the field behind the house on a rainy night, my bare feet covered in mud. But they found me, dragged me back, and tied me to the foot of the bed for 2 days, without food, leaving only a cup of dirty water that I didn't dare drink. I don't know why they are like that. Perhaps they were other people before I was born, but to me, they were just captives, and that house was a prison that I had to escape at all costs. Jake was the first light in that darkness. He went to the same school as me, a tall, thin boy with messy hair and a gentle smile. He wasn't someone who stood out in a crowd, not the captain of the football team, not the best student in the class, but he had a big heart, so big that he was willing to do anything to help me. I first met him in the school library when I hid there to avoid having to go home after school. I sat alone in the corner, my eyes were red, the book in my hand was just an excuse so no one asked. Jake walked over, didn't say anything, just quietly sat down next to me, took out a slightly melted chocolate candy bar from his bag, and gave it to me. "You look like you need this more than I do," he said, his voice gentle. I looked at him, surprised, but then took the candy bar, and from then on we became friends. Through afternoons at the library, escapes to the park near school, I told him everything. The invisible scars, the nights I cried in silence, and the way my parents turned me into a shadow of myself. Jake doesn't judge, doesn't pity, just listens. He became my refuge, the only person I trusted in a world full of fear. When I turned 16, I couldn't take it anymore. One evening, after my dad broke the desk lamp because I dropped a plate, I ran to Jake's house, banging on the door in a panic. "I have to get out of here," I said, tears streamed down my eyes. "But they will find you," Jake replied, his eyes worried. "Unless..." He paused, then looked at me, eyes shining with a crazy idea. "If you get married, the law will consider you an adult. You won't have to go back there anymore." I was surprised. "But who will marry me?" I asked, my voice shaking. Jake smiled, gently but firmly. "I will do it. We got married on a rainy afternoon at the local courthouse with two witnesses who were Jake's friends whose names I didn't even know. I was wearing an old gray sweater and ripped jeans, and Jake was wearing a wrinkled shirt that he had hastily ironed before arriving. There were no flowers, no party, no romantic vows, just a certificate and the promise that he would protect me. I took his last name, a new name to erase the old name, like removing a curse. Our marriage lasted 5 years. We lived together in a small, shabby apartment in the suburbs, with stained walls and wooden floors that creaked every time we walked. We worked part-time at a nearby coffee shop, standing behind the counter for hours to earn money to pay rent and college tuition. There were days when we just ate instant noodles, sat on the floor with an old blanket wrapped around us, laughing about how rich we were with each other. One time, when I was very sick, Jake stayed up all night to take care of me, putting a wet towel on my forehead and telling silly stories to help me forget the fever. But we both know it's not romantic love, it's friendship, it's sacrifice, it's a contract to set me free. When we were 21, after graduating and starting to settle down, we divorced. Not because we hate each other, but because we want to give each other a chance to live our own lives. Jake remained with me like a brother, and 3 years ago, it was he who introduced me to Virus. Virus is a completely different man from Jake. He is tall, with neatly cut black hair and deep brown eyes that seem to be able to see into other people's souls. He works in the technology industry, a programmer with a passion for code and traditional values that I have never understood. He grew up in a warm suburban family, where Sunday dinner was sacred, where his parents hugged each other every morning and told jokes while cooking. He often told me about Christmas holidays at his house, when the whole family gathered around the tree, opened gifts, and sang old songs. One time my younger brother spilled sauce on Mom's shirt, and the whole family laughed so hard they couldn't breathe, he said, a bright smile on his face. To me, family is a foreign word, a concept that I gave up a long time ago. But Virus never forced me to talk about the past. The only time I mentioned my parents was when we had only been dating for a few months. We were sitting on a park bench, eating ice cream on a summer afternoon, the sunlight shining through the trees making his hair shine like a halo. "Do you visit your family often?" he asked, his voice carefree. I was silent, looking down at my worn shoes, feeling like there was a rock pressing on my chest. "I'm not in contact with them," I said, my voice hoarse. He looked at me, didn't ask any more questions, just put his hand on my shoulder. "It's okay, I don't need to know the reason. When you're ready, I'll listen." I looked up, saw his gentle eyes as if he wanted to hug me, and I knew I loved him right then and there. Loved his patience, loved the way he respected the boundary I built up like a wall. But tonight, that wall collapsed. It all started with a text message last December, right before Christmas. I deleted my old Facebook a long time ago, cutting off all links with the past after my divorce from Jake. But then I created a new account in November, just to keep in touch with a few friends and colleagues at the design company where I work. In my haste, I forgot to set my privacy. One evening, as I was lying on the sofa watching a movie with Virus, a romantic comedy he chose to make me laugh, my phone lit up. A text message from my mother, the woman I've tried to forget for the past 10 years. "Cream, Mom and Dad want to see you for Christmas. Can we talk?" I looked at that message. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding like it was about to burst. Memories came flooding back. My father's screams, my mother's cold eyes, and the way they laughed when I begged. I felt like the room was shrinking. The air was choking. Virus sat next to me and saw the screen light up. "Who is that?" he asked, his voice gentle. I gulped, trying to stay calm. "My mother," I replied, my voice cracking. He tilted his head, wanting to ask more, but I cut him off. "I don't want to answer you. I have a reason, but I'm not ready to say it yet. Is that okay?" He nodded, gently rubbing my back like he always does when I'm stressed. "Okay, I won't force you." I blocked her right after that, deleting the messages as if deleting a nightmare. I think it's all over. But no, tonight, when Virus knelt down with my grandmother's ring, the silver ring she used to wear every day, the tiny blue stones sparkling like her eyes when she told me fairy tales, I felt something was wrong. "Where did you get it?" I asked, my voice shaking. He smiled, as if it were a proud story. "I contacted your mother," he said. "I saw her name in a text message at Christmas, tried to message her through a mutual friend online, and met them a few days later. I asked them for permission to marry you, Cream. They gave me this ring, saying your grandmother always wanted me to have it." I felt the blood in my body freeze. My mind was spinning. He went to meet them, the people I swore I would never let touch my life again. He told them about me, my job at the design firm, my place in this city, the life I had built from the ashes, and he brought that ring back, as a gift, not knowing that it was a knife stabbing straight into my heart. I shouted, my voice breaking, "How dare you do that? How dare you step past the only limit I set?" Virus was surprised and stood up, eyes wide open. "Cream, I don't understand. I just want to do it the right way." "The right way?" I interrupted, tears welling up in my eyes. "I know you don't want anything to do with them. You know I don't talk to them, and you still do that?" He stammered, trying to explain. "I think you're just angry with them over a small thing. I want to heal." "Heal?" I screamed, my voice hoarse. "I don't know what they did to you. I don't know, and I have no right to decide for you." He stood there motionless, still holding the ring, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. "Cream, listen to me. Get out!" I shouted, pointing towards the door. He looked at me, his eyes red, but I couldn't bear it anymore. "Go out," I repeated, tears streaming down my cheeks. He bowed his head, placed the ring on the table, and walked out the door, leaving me with heavy silence and an empty apartment. Now my phone lights up nonstop. Virus texts, calls, leaves voicemails. His sister Rose, my close friend since I met her at a Virus birthday party, also texted to ask, "Virus is at my house, he's panicking. What's going on, Cream? Tell me." Rose's text message appeared, but my hands were shaking so much I couldn't answer. I pressed the button to listen to a voicemail from Virus, and his voice cracked. "Cream, I'm sorry if I upset you. I just want to do the right thing. I think family is important, and I want your dad to walk you down the aisle and want our children to meet their grandparents one day. I met them, and they seemed like good people. They told me that you ran away from home because of a small misunderstanding, that you were punished and overreacted. I don't have a bad feeling about them, Cream. If I did, I wouldn't. Please call me back." I hung up the phone, feeling like my stomach was twisting. They lied to you. A little misunderstanding? They have turned you into their tool, and you do not know the truth. The truth that I have never had the courage to tell. I love my grandmother. She was the only light during those dark years, the only person in the family who ever hugged me without a slap or scolding. I remember the afternoons sitting next to my grandmother in an old armchair, listening to her tell fairy tales, her voice as gentle as a lullaby. She often stroked my hair, saying that I was her jewel, and I believed her, even if only for those brief moments. She passed away when I was 12 years old, leaving me with my parents and an unfillable void. Her ring is a souvenir I always cherish in my memories, but now it is stained by the hands of those who used it to interfere in my life again. I feel sick thinking that they touched it, gave it to Virus as a way to pull me back. And Virus, the man I love, accidentally became a bridge for them. I went to therapy years ago, after my divorce from Jake. The therapist, a middle-aged woman with gray hair and a deep voice, told me to write down my feelings, draw them, or do anything to release them. "You don't have to keep it all inside, Cream," she said. "Let it out, even if it's just on paper." So, here I sit, in the dark, writing this story on a crumpled piece of paper with the dim desk lamp illuminating the shaky words. I wrote about the days imprisoned in that house, about Jake and his kindness, about Virus and the love that I once believed was forever. I write about pain, betrayal, and the fear that I will never escape my past. But as I wrote, I realized I couldn't go on like this. I couldn't let my past dictate my future again. The phone lights up again. A text from Jake. "Virus just called me. Are you okay, Cream? I'm on my way to you." I looked at the message, tears rolling down my cheeks. Jake always knows when I need him, even if I don't say it. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and Jake stood there with the same messy hair and gentle smile as ever. "You look terrible," he said, coming in and hugging me tightly. I cried in his arms, telling him everything. My mother's text messages, Virus's actions, and her ring. Jake listened, didn't interrupt, just squeezed my hand as I shook with anger and pain. "I didn't expect him to do that," he said when I finished. "But you need to talk to him, Cream. You can't just run away forever." Jake stayed with me until morning, making tea and sitting next to me on the sofa. He told me about the days after our divorce. He was now a construction engineer, living alone in a small but cozy apartment. "I always want you to be happy," he said. And I think Virus did too, even though he was wrong. As the sun rose, I knew I had to face Virus. I texted him, "Meet me at the park at 8 a.m. We need to talk." Virus arrived on time. His eyes were dark. His face was haggard as if he hadn't slept all night. He sat down next to me on the bench, a small distance away from me, as if afraid I would scream again. "Cream, I'm sorry," he began, his voice hoarse. "I don't know your past. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I was wrong. I never wanted to hurt you." I looked at him, with mixed emotions in my heart. "I didn't know because you never told me," I said, taking a deep breath. And then, for the first time, I told him the truth. The years of abuse, the fear, and the reason I left home. He listened, his eyes red, his hands gripping the chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. When I finished telling him, he knelt down in front of me, not to propose, but to apologize. "I don't deserve you," he said, tears falling. "But if you give me a chance, I swear I will never cross your boundaries again." I looked at Virus, the man I loved, kneeling in front of me on the damp grass of the park, his red eyes sparkling in the morning sunlight. The wind blew gently, carrying the smell of newly cut grass and wildflowers, but there was only a coldness inside me, not from the weather, but from the old wounds bleeding in my soul. I told him I needed time, that we would start over step by step, and he promised never to contact my parents again. But when he held my hand, when I felt the warmth of his rough fingers, another thought arose in me. Not forgiveness, but revenge. Not to destroy them, but to take back what they took from me. Freedom, dignity, and the right to live without having to look over my shoulder in fear. I squeezed Virus's hand, but not with the gentleness he expected. "I won't run away anymore," I said, my voice harder than I expected, like a blade that had just been sharpened. "But I won't let them win either, not after everything they've done." He looked at me, his eyes wide open, surprised and worried. "Cream, what are you going to do?" he asked, his voice shaking. I didn't answer right away, just looked out into the distance, where the horizon faded into the morning sunlight, and felt a small fire flare up in my chest. Not a fire of hope, but of determination. In the days that followed, I didn't just sit still and heal. I started to take action. I reconnected with my old therapist, Margaret, over a brief phone call. "I want to face them," I said, my voice firm, "but not for reconciliation. I want them to pay." She was silent for a moment, then replied, "Cream, revenge can free you, but it can also imprison you forever. Are you sure?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see it over the phone. "I don't want blood or violence. I want justice. The justice I should have had 10 years ago." With the help of Jake, who has always been my strong support, I began to collect evidence. Those horrifying memories weren't just nightmares, they were real, and I knew there were still traces somewhere. I searched through painful memories, the times I went to the hospital for the reason of falling, but the doctor never asked more questions, the times the teacher looked at me with suspicious eyes but did not dare to intervene. Jake finds an old friend from high school, now a lawyer, named Min. Min agreed to help me without charge, with just one sentence: "If what you tell me is true, Cream, then they don't deserve to be free." We dig deeper. I remembered an old diary that I had hidden under the wooden floor in my bedroom before leaving home. I'm not sure if it's still there, but I have to try. I asked Jake to drive me back to my old house, a place I had never been back to since the day I ran away with him. Standing in front of the rotten wooden door with peeling paint, my heart was pounding like it was about to burst. Jake put his hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to come in if you don't want to," he said, but I shook my head. "No, I have to. My parents weren't there." I checked with an old acquaintance in the neighborhood, who knew they usually went out on Saturday mornings to go to the market. I used the spare key that I had hidden under a withered potted plant on the porch. To my surprise, it was still there. Stepping inside, the smell of mold and old alcohol assaulted my nose, like a punch from the past. Everything is still the same. The tattered sofa where my father used to sit, the kitchen table where my mother used to stand, looking at me with cold eyes. I trembled, but didn't stop. I went straight up to my room, knelt on the floor, and used a small knife Jake gave me to pry up the loose wood. Below, covered in dust, was the diary. The leather cover was worn, the pages yellowed but still intact. I opened it and saw my own shaky handwriting from 10 years ago. Dad hit me today because I broke a glass. Mom laughed. I don't want to live anymore. Tears fell from my eyes, but I didn't cry because I was sad. I cried because I was angry, because I finally had proof. Min used the diary along with my testimony and a few witnesses Jake found, a neighbor who heard me scream, a former teacher who reported suspected abuse but was ignored, to build the case. We don't just stop at denouncing them for what they did to me. Min discovered that my parents had received benefits from the local government by falsely claiming that I was seriously ill, even after I left home. That is fraud and a serious crime. I didn't want to see them again, didn't want to look into those evil eyes again, so I let Min and Jake act on my behalf. The case lasted 3 months, and I did not attend the trial. I did not have to listen to their excuses or pleas. I just need to know the results. The day of reckoning came one July afternoon as I sat in the apartment with Virus. He stayed with me the whole time, didn't ask too many questions, just quietly made tea and held my hand when I was trembling with tension. The phone rang, and Jake's voice rang out, calm but emotional. They're sentenced Cream. 7 years in prison for both of them. Child abuse and financial fraud. They can't touch you anymore. I fell silent, let the phone fall to my lap, and felt a cold air rush over me. Not fear, but relief. Virus hugged me, didn't say anything, just squeezed me tightly as if wanting to give me the strength I had found for myself. But I don't stop there. Justice is the first step. But I want a new life. A life that I define for myself, untethered by the ghosts of the past. I told Virus that I wanted to leave this city where every street corner reminded me of painful days. I want to start over, in a place where no one knows who I am. No one knows what happened, I said. He looked at me, his warm brown eyes now filled with sympathy. I'll go with you, he replied without hesitation. Anywhere you want. We chose a small coastal town hundreds of kilometers away, where the salty air of the sea mixed with the steady sound of waves every night. I sold my old apartment, used my savings to buy a small wooden house near the beach. Not luxurious, but warm enough with a small fireplace and windows overlooking the ocean. Virus quit his job as a programmer in the city and switched to working remotely, while I started over as a designer, taking on freelance projects online. We were in no rush to get married. My grandmother's ring still sat in a small wooden box on the shelf, waiting for the day when I was ready to wear it without feeling the shadow of its past. But every night, when I sit next to Virus on the porch, hear the sound of the waves, and feel the warmth of his hand, I know I have found a real home. Not in the four walls, but in the peace that I create for myself. Jake visits us once a month, bringing stories about his life in the city and chocolate bars that he knows I like. You look different, he said during one visit, as we sat on the beach watching the sunset. There is no longer a look of fear in your eyes. I smiled, feeling for the first time in many years that smile truly belonged to me. I got myself back, I replied, and he nodded, as if that was what he had always hoped for.